The Netflix summer event trilogy has reached the midway point with Fear Street Part 2, 1978. This time, the campy horror is truly campy, as the setting for this slasher takes place at summer camp. Should this be at the top of your binge list? Shadyside, 1978. School's out for the summer and the activities at Camp Nightwing are about to begin. But when another Shadysider is possessed with the urge to kill, the fun in the sun becomes a gruesome fight for survival. The second film of the horror trilogy, based on R.L. Stine's novels, picks up right where the first left off. But this time, we're getting the story told to us rather than watching it play out in the present. This is going to be spoiler-free because I don't want to ruin the fun for those of you that have been looking forward to this movie. While the first movie opened up with a pretty exciting scene and then backed off a little bit before ramping up the horror, this one starts off a little slower and takes this time to establish the whole world for us. We watch the kids from Shadyside and Sunnyvale attend summer camp at Camp Nightwing. We meet Ziggy, Cindy, Alice, Nick, Will, Mary Lane, and Tommy. And I liked that this one took on a brand new feel, at least new for the series. This certainly has the vibes of the 80s slashers, and most notably we get the vibes of Friday the 13th and Sleepaway Camp. There's also a small, and I mean okay, very small, inkling of the Goonies, and that's probably due mostly to the disparity between the cool and the uncool kids. Now the setting for the camp in 1978 is captured well by the music and attire, and the world is built up nicely for us. The music is aptly placed, and almost all of the songs perfectly complement the action. The setting also allows for the dark and ominous atmosphere where there are literally thousands of places to hide within the forest, and that could be if you're a perpetrator or a victim. The anxiety and horror slowly build here, and I'd say it's probably 45 minutes into the film before any of the gore really begins. Now the movie is only an hour and 49 minutes, but that last hour is just pure slasher film. This installment tops the first in blood and gore. Now sure, it does take longer to get to that point, but once it starts, whoo-hoo, watch out! Now this really is reminiscent of those 80s slashers that I had mentioned before. And I'm not sure they're really scary, at least anymore, and this one is kind of the same. I wasn't freaked out. Yeah, there is tension as the chase began, but it wasn't actually scary. And I think that's some of what I really enjoyed here. It brought a lot of nostalgia from watching those campy horrors. Pun intended, totally. Please don't unsubscribe. There are obvious points to the story, and there are also portions where some massive conveniences are at play. One or two of those bothered me just a bit because they felt a little lazy, but it's also just a clean or quick way to keep the story progressing. I really enjoyed Sadie Sink as Ziggy. She's a lot of fun with a bunch of charisma. And Emily Rudd as Cindy was also a standout in this. I really enjoyed the character arc and transition of her, even if it was an obvious one. I liked how the story continued to build on the lore that we learned about in the first film, and we are now shown how so many of the references are being connected. It keeps the story growing and still makes me excited to see what's to come in the final movie. Now there's some gross and disgusting imagery and set designs at play in this story, but some of the authenticity or realism, it's kind of questionable. One involves the amount of a growing substance in a certain location. Yeah, I know it's vague, but it just felt like there was way too little of it for the supposed length that it had been there. And another was the amount of detritus in a certain spot that really should have been just inundated with stuff. Now these are little nitpicks, and they didn't bother me too much, but they are there. So the pace of the movie steadily grows. I didn't feel that it was slow or even dragging, even though at the beginning of the movie it was taking the time to just establish the story and there wasn't a whole lot of action taking place. Now if you're looking for a movie with blood and guts, this one definitely provides. The violence is high and the amount of gore is actually pretty impressive. The overall tone of this is also really dark. Now I know that any movie where people are killed is dark in theme, but this one, because of who the victims are, is even more weighty. Now I mentioned that some portions were predictable or obvious, but there were also moments that were able to surprise me. And most of these weren't massive portions to the story, but it was still fun to have moments that I didn't expect. If you enjoyed the first installment, then you'll have fun with this one, especially if you like 80s slasher films. So overall, this was a gore-filled homage to the 80s camp slashers that ties in nicely with the world and lore that was established in the first movie. This could be viewed without seeing the first one, but I don't think it would be nearly as fun or make as much sense. I had fun, and I'm excited to see the conclusion next week with Fear Street Part 3, 1666. There's sex, nudity, a lot of profanity, and an absolute ton of bloody and gory violence. I give Fear Street Part 2, 1978, 4 out of 5 couches. So are you having fun with the trilogy so far? Who are some of your favorite characters? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.